Well, the CCA workbench, every week we have rigs and techniques, and this week we're going to do something a little outside of our box.
Yeah, well, I came up, one of the fellas, one of our guides sent me the idea for this. You know, he said, you know, you need to show the people the Neko rig. And it's been a rig that's been around for a couple of years. The pros have known it for a little while longer. But what this thing is, it's kind of like a wacky rig, and you use a soft bait, usually a straight worm is what you want to use, and that's a Bass Assassin tap out. And you know, a good straight worm. It's a finesse rig, and you know, you use lighter line with this, probably 6 to 8 pound test fluorocarbon. And the key to this rig is a weight at one end. You put your weight at the fat end of the worm, and that is going to be bouncing on the ground. Your hook is at the other end, you know, at the top end,
yeah,
and it's going to be floating up. And you're going to, when you throw this rig in, it's going to go straight to the bottom, and that's what they like about it. It goes straight to the bottom really quickly, and you can adjust how fast it goes to the bottom by the type of weight and the amount of weight you put on the end. So if you're fishing in shallow water and you don't want it to go straight to the bottom real quick, you can put like a nail in there or something like that.
Right.
And that's how it started, was guys using nails. VMC actually makes this hook for the Neko rig. You know, it says on there, the Neko rig hook. And what it is, it's a light wire hook with a kind of a long shank and a bit of an offset. And the hook is very important in this, because you want a light wire hook that's going to the worm will be able to lift up off the bottom. You don't want such a heavy hook that it's going to make the rig not work.
It changes the action.
Yeah, so you want a really light wire hook, and believe it or not, a light wire hook is plenty strong enough, you know, even for a big bass, if it's well made. And what you do is when you rig this, it's important to rig it with, when you insert the hook, to insert it towards the weight, so that when it comes all the way through, it's facing away from the weight. And so when that thing comes down and the bass comes and eats it, the hook point is exposed, and it's pointing up. So it's got a really great hookup ratio.
I imagine with braided line, it's spectacular.
Yeah, what you do is you have a light braid, and then you have a 6 or 8 pound test monofilament leader.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
Fluorocarbon I would use. You know, I'd use a little fluorocarbon leader, and you cast that out and you just bounce it on the bottom. You can either keep it in contact with the bottom the whole time, or you can give it a little shake when you pick it up. You know, pick it up, give it a little jig. And what they'll also do is, when they let it sink, as it sinks down to the bottom, and as soon as it hits the bottom, you just give your rod tip a couple shakes back and forth. And what it does is it makes that tail wiggle. You know, you can make that tail wiggle, but give it a good shimmy when it gets to the bottom. And it should make that tail wiggle. Then you pick it up. The only reason to pick that thing up is to drop it back down. So that's what you wanted to do. The Neko name, I've heard 2 different versions of why it's called a Neko rig. Neko supposedly is Japanese for cat, and a cat pawing in his litter box puts up little puffs of sand. So that's what they say that nail does. You know, It makes a little puff. I've also heard, it was another guy called it a Neko something else, which means a vacuum cleaner, because it sucked up all the fish. It was a really productive for him. Now, you don't have to only use a worm. You could also use a small swim bait. You know, just make sure you put the weight in the fat end, and it's gonna do the exact same thing. The tail will float, and the lead part, the weighted end, will be down in the dirt, and that's what simulates a feeding minnow.
Yeah.
You know, a minnow will get down and feed like that, and what that does is, you know, hopping and going down to the bottom makes it look like a small minnow, and the way that the hook is up at the top makes it very deadly.
This is the little tapper. It looks like the one thing I always liked about the little tapper on the flats, for whatever reason, this tail, when it would be head down, the tail would be up in the air like this. Right. It was like it had air or something in here, and it didn't want to lay down.
That's perfect, and it's perfect for this, the tap out worm too.
Yeah.
It's got the same thing. It's got a bulb on the end where you can do the same thing. If you don't want to use a worm, you can also use a sluggo type bait. They use these a lot, sometimes even smaller than this, and you can use an O-ring. I don't know if you can see it on here. I have an O-ring tool, and what this does is, these O-rings allow you to hook the bait. I mean, hook through underneath the O-ring instead of going through the bait. This does 2 things. It keeps your bait from getting tore up when the fish eats it. You can use it over and over again, and it's a lot easier to hook. You know, it's a one-time thing where you don't have to worry about it. But a really cool thing that I can't wait to try. It's supposed to work good in clear water and in dark water. Muddy water probably not so much, because they got to be able to see it. And that little thing bouncing up and down with that hook up is going to be awesome for me, and I'm glad I found out about it.
You know, Dave, you amaze me. You really do. I appreciate your homework sometimes. Because that whole 5 minutes I was learning.
Well, good.
As they say, you're going to learn a day. I just learned.
Thank you.
All right,
He learned us.
He learned us.
He learned us. He learned us well. Now we all know what Nico is.